So my work is a direct evolution from the work of Dr. Feldenkrais, and I was blessed to be study with him, know him from a young age, do his work from a very young age, meaning practice it on myself through a dance teacher, and and be supported by him to become my own person, which was really one of the biggest gifts he gave me. And so I began working initially actually with high performers because that was more my background. So it was musicians and dancers and athletes. And I loved the work because unlike how I was trained in clinical psychology, where we had to find a problem in a person and then try to get them out of their problem, with the work I learned with Dr. Feldenkrais, you didn't have to have a problem to get better. You just had to be alive and have a brain. And he really understood it was all about the brain, and it was about brain change, brain plasticity. Didn't have the terminology in those years. And so the path went working actually with high performers to working with more regular people, but still a lot musicians, San Francisco Symphony, Boston Symphony, all that stuff. But they had trouble. People usually came to me because they had a problem. I had very few people came to me and say, I'm doing amazing, I want to do better. That's not very common. And then for whatever history, however it went, the first child with special needs showed in my life. And she was diagnosed with global brain damage with a prognosis of never being able to do anything, never becoming a human. And I was very lucky to be totally ignorant about pediatrics and therapy. So I just started working with her, and she started changing. So as long as she changed, I kept going, and her parents kept bringing her to me. And that's, as many of you know, is Elizabeth, who today is married, has 2 master's degrees, has a business of her own, and we email to each other from time to time, which still, every time I get an email from her, it's remarkable. And her brother, when he was in his early 20s, a little bit older than her, one time took me for lunch and told me he's jealous. He's envious of Elizabeth. And I was very surprised and asked him why. He said, because she learns in a way that I can't learn the same way. And I know it's because of the work she got. And I want to be able to learn like her. What can I do? So you can see that you can take even a brain that's considered inferior to begin with, she's missing a good chunk of her cerebellum. It's a defect, it has a title, a diagnosis for it, doesn't matter. And you can, with consistent and effective process, bring it to actually act as a superior nervous system, because it does as well or better than other people with the challenges that are built in that you cannot change. Now, not every child I've worked with has come to quite that much of a resolution in terms of the limitations, but the work with the children has been really magical. So between working with adults and working with the children, I started asking, what about what I do works? And I spent about 15 years, first of all, continuously being surprised at the transformational, what very often people call little changes. I decided one day that there's not a small change or a big change, there's only yes change or no change. So I look for change, and positive change, of course. And that led to me defining some of what I realized works. And that's what eventually I wrote in my first book, and I defined as the 9 essentials. And once I defined those, and more research came online that supported the ideas behind the essentials, I got more courageous. It's finally, I wasn't just a little lone person in a small room doing her thing. And so then I got more courageous, and I use it, and I promote it more openly and clearly, so the outcomes get better and faster. So that is what this work is about. The kind of the cornerstone or the main initial essential is movement, but not movement by itself, and certainly not movement as exercise, but what I call movement with attention, which is I discovered by observing other people do stuff and by observing myself and the outcomes and so on, that the moment attention to the self, attention to the feeling of self, the attention to when somebody moves, just seem to drive change really, really quickly, very often transformational change. And again, because of the kids, I've seen it in children as young. The youngest I've worked with was 5 weeks old.